Modern city defense, everyday objects that could save your life. Before we go any further, if you value historically grounded survival knowledge and clear-eyed analysis of how civilians endure conflict, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment so this work reaches others who take preparedness seriously. This guide is built for viewers who understand that urban warfare is not theory, but a recurring historical reality, and that survival often depends on what is already within arm's reach rather than specialized equipment. After the sirens. Modern cities have always been paradoxical in wartime. They are dense with resources yet fragile, crowded yet isolating, advanced yet, brutally unforgiving when systems collapse. From besieged European capitals in the 20th century to contemporary conflicts in dense urban environments, civilians have survived not because they were armed like soldiers, but because they understood how to adapt ordinary objects to defensive, protective, and evasive purposes. This is not about aggression or heroics. It is about buying time, creating space, and staying alive long enough to escape danger. What follows is not speculation, but distilled logic drawn from history, civil defense doctrine, and real urban survival accounts. Why modern city defense has always depended on adaptation rather than weapons. History shows that civilians rarely control the tools of war. In Warsaw, Sarajevo, Aleppo, and countless lesser-known cities, survival depended on adapting the environment rather than overpowering it. Urban defense, for non-combatants, has always been about situational awareness, deterrence, concealment, and mobility. Everyday objects mattered because they were legal, available, and familiar. More importantly, they did not attract attention. A civilian who survived learned to think in terms of function rather than form, asking what an object could block, reinforce, signal, or delay. How common clothing becomes protective equipment under fire. Clothing has saved lives in every urban conflict, not by stopping bullets, but by reducing injury and exposure. Heavy jackets, layered fabrics, scarves, and gloves have historically served as improvised padding against shrapnel, broken glass, and debris. During artillery bombardments, civilians wrapped scarves or shirts around forearms and necks to reduce lacerations. While moving through damaged structures, thick-soled shoes or boots were not fashion items, but survival tools, allowing movement across rubble-strewn streets without disabling foot injuries. In practice, a civilian preparing to move through a damaged building would layer clothing tightly, cover exposed skin, and secure loose fabric to prevent snagging. This simple habit reduced blood loss, infection, and long-term injury across multiple conflicts. So, let's consider how backpacks and bags become mobile shields and survival systems. A backpack has long been one of the most underestimated defensive tools in a city at war. When packed correctly, it becomes both protection and insurance. Items like books, folded clothing, water containers, and other dense everyday objects can actually absorb fragments and blunt impacts from falling debris. In urban fighting, civilians often carried backpacks across their chests while moving through open areas, relying on mass rather than material to reduce injury from fragmentation. Historically, bags also allowed for rapid evacuation without repeated exposure to danger. The practical application is pretty straightforward. Pack dense items closest to the side, most likely to face danger, keep essential supplies centralized, and use the bag as a movable barrier when crossing exposed doorways or windows. Now let's talk about why furniture has always been central to civilian defense inside buildings. Urban sieges have shown time and again that furniture is more than just comfort. It's structure. Tables, wardrobes, mattresses, and bookshelves were routinely repositioned to reinforce walls, block line of sight, and create internal safe zones. Mattresses leaned against interior walls absorbed debris and helped muffle blast effects, while heavy furniture, placed against windows, reduced the risk of glass fragmentation. In practical terms, civilians learned to identify which walls were load-bearing, then use furniture to create secondary barriers inside rooms, rather than relying solely on external walls. This approach reduced injury during shelling and provided protected movement paths within apartments and offices. And finally, let's explore how everyday tools serve as deterrents and escape aids. Tools were never really about confrontation, but rather about control of space. Flashlights allowed movement during blackouts without revealing permanent light sources. Whistles and metal objects provided signaling without the need to shout, which was a crucial advantage when communication had to be brief and deliberate. Simple hand tools like screwdrivers or hammers were historically used to breach locked interior doors during fires or collapses, not for fighting. The defensive value lay in escape and noise deterrence. A sudden metallic sound in a stairwell, for example, often discouraged opportunistic attackers who preferred silence and surprise. The key lesson here is that tools extend agency, allowing civilians to open, block, signal, or flee when every second counts. Everyday liquids and materials have, often played a crucial role in reducing visibility and detection. In urban defense, the focus was frequently on denying visibility rather than directly engaging threats. Historically, soap, water, and cloth were used not just for cleanliness, but to reduce smoke inhalation and to obscure movement during fires. Dust, sand, and debris scattered on floors could reveal footprints, a simple yet surprisingly effective early warning method that civilians used while sheltering in abandoned buildings. In practical terms, just a thin layer of debris near entry points allowed the occupants to detect any intrusion, and all of this without the need for constant surveillance, which really helped conserve both energy and attention over long periods. When it comes to survival, mental discipline and familiarity with your environment often matter far more than sheer strength. Survivors have consistently reported that knowing their surroundings and their tools was, honestly, more important than physical power. Everyday objects became effective not because they were weapons, but because civilians instinctively knew how to handle them under stress. For example, a chair wasn't a weapon. It was a barrier, a delay, a way to control distance. And a door? That wasn't cover but concealment, something to reinforce or avoid depending on the context. This kind of mindset prevented panic-driven mistakes. The practical takeaway here is deliberate rehearsal. Knowing in advance which objects in a room can block, buffer, or signal, instead of having to figure it out in the middle of danger. So, how does all this remain relevant in modern cities? Well, despite all the technological progress, cities are still vulnerable in much the same ways as before. Glass, density, our reliance on infrastructure, and the patterns of human movement really haven't changed all that much. Everyday objects still shape survival outcomes because, honestly, civilians still don't have armored protection. Understanding how ordinary items can function defensively is what turns passive residents into informed survivors, and all of this without crossing that line into combatant behavior. Historically, that distinction has always mattered, preserving both life and legal status. Modern city defense isn't about turning civilians into fighters. It's about preserving life through adaptation, awareness, and disciplined use of what already exists. If this guide has, in any way, added to your understanding of how people have survived cities at war, do consider subscribing to the channel, share this video with others who value serious historical analysis, and, leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. This knowledge endures because cities endure, and those who study history know that preparedness is never outdated after the sirens.